When police officers get called to solve a paranormal crime, it's time for things to heat up or cool down. And then we travel to Canada to take a look at the story of a young man who believes he may have solved the mystery of everything. Is it possible there is a connection between GameStop Stock and the end of reality? Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. Hope you guys are having a great day too. Hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. We got a lot of stuff to cover today. So first off, running into Dead Rabbit Radio Command at top speed. Everyone get on your feet and give it up for Aiden Falkenberg. Woohoo, yeah, wee, haha, yeah. Aiden's running around, jumping up and down, having a good time. Wee. Aiden, you're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the show financially through the Patreon or through the YouTube memberships, that's totally fine. It really, really is. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Patreon supporters do get the show ad-free, and they have the access to the Discord as well. So there's some other perks for the Patreon members. Aiden, let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to go ahead. I just had a vision. Not a literal vision. You have to be specific when you're talking about the paranormal. Aiden, I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to the Bunny Boogie Board. This is a new vehicle, a Bunny Boogie Board. Everyone put on your wetsuits and get on board this boogie board. I don't know what the sound effect's going to be either. I just came up with this. You're like, how's he going to make this sound? Everyone climb on top of the boogie board or on top of Aiden's shoulders. He just has this tower of people on his shoulders. Aiden, get ready, get set, go. Take this boogie board out of Dead Rabbit Radio Command. We're going to surf all the way out to Boston. Splash. We're all walking around Boston. We're about to meet this dude. Let's call him Marcus. Marcus is a no-nonsense Boston cop. It's the 1990s. He's got a lot of heads to crack. Oi, mates, what are you doing here? Get away from that bank. Oh, sorry, we'll stop robbing it, sir. You better know better next time. Marcus says. He's walking down the street. He's like, oi, you, stealing the candy. Give it back. And the robbers are like, sorry, we're stealing this candy. Here, you can have this back. Walking around Boston, knocking heads open, stopping bank robberies, and apparently they had a big problem with candy robberies as well. One day, Marcus gets a call to solve a domestic disturbance. Easily the worst possible call for a cop to get. That's not true. That can be way worse, right? Nowadays, things can be way worse. But in general, it's true, because you're going to involve yourself in a fight between two people who, despite what's happening right now, might have deep feelings for each other. It's your job to get in the middle of that. And a lot of times when you add a third party to these, the husband and the wife end up beating up the police officer or anyone else who gets in the way. Their love is rekindled when someone tries to step between them, literally. And the next thing you know, you're getting a fork in the eyeball as you're trying to pry the husband off of the wife. It's super deadly to get involved in a domestic dispute. So Marcus is obviously concerned about this as he's headed out to this call. But when he pulls up, he sees something on the front porch. This hunched over man, and he's kind of covered up in a blanket, and he's just kind of laying there, weakly clawing at the front door. Marcus is like, what? So he gets out of his car, and it's the middle of August. I don't know if I said that. It's the early 90s. It's the middle of August. He gets out, and it's a muggy Boston August day. What in the world is this dude doing wrapped in a blanket? Marcus approaches him. He goes, sir, are you okay? Are you okay? And the man turns and looks at Marcus His teeth are chattering. As he's trying to talk, Marcus can see his entire body shiver. He's wrapped up in this blanket, and he goes, "Sir, you gotta stop her. You gotta stop her." I was like, what in the world's going on? Dude, it's hella hot. He's sweating through his uniform, and this guy, who Marcus is also starting to notice, is a slight shade of blue. Marcus goes, oh my god, this guy is freezing. This guy is freezing. It's 80 degrees out. His teeth are chattering. His skin is slightly turning blue. He's wrapped up in this blanket. Marcus is like, what in the world? What in the world is going on? This is the last thing he expected to see. She's in there with the doll. The doll. You're like, Jason, we get it. He's cold. Are you gonna do this the whole time? He has his monologue. He's like, to be or not to be. You get it. His teeth are chattering so hard he can't talk. He goes, officer, my wife's in the house and we're fighting. I'll totally be aware of that if you take me to a jail. If you have the warmest jail in the world, I'll go. We're fighting, and she's getting back at me. She made a voodoo doll of me, and she put it in the freezer. Officer, can you please go inside and break open the freezer and get the little me? You'll know it's me. It looks just like me, except it's not blue. Will you go in there and get this doll? Apparently, they did not do that. They did not break into the house and break into the fridge. I'm wondering, I don't know if it was this man's house that he shared with his girlfriend, or that... Because if it was his house, he'd be like, yeah, give us permission to go in the house. We'll go and we'll destroy all of your voodoo dolls as they're tossing it for drugs, trying to find anything else to arrest the guy. But if it was her house, they wouldn't really have a reason to go in there. They couldn't say, well, we have reports there's a voodoo doll or dolls in this home. We want to go in and search for them because it's not against the law. And they didn't really believe him because magic's not real. So they ended up having the guy shipped off to the hospital instead. We don't know whether or not this guy lived or died. I think that would be noted in the story if they took him to the hospital and he froze to death, and then Mulder and Scully showed up to investigate how a guy freezes to death in 80-degree weather in Boston. This story was posted online by someone going by the name Milkshake Maker. And Marcus, that was a fake name we gave, but that was his dad. He said, my dad told me this story back when he was a police officer. A long time ago, and I got another story, this isn't the end, but a long time ago, we covered something like this. I'll put the episode in the show notes. I actually, not this freezing to death thing, but police and the paranormal. It's always been a belief of mine, long predating the show, that first responders would deal with the paranormal probably on a regular basis, akin to that of a minister, or even akin to that of a exorcist. Because I think they would end up seeing a lot of this stuff before it even got to the level where you were going to an exorcist, to where you were contacting your faith leaders in your community. They'll get called out to these scenes, EMTs coming out. And I know a guy who's an EMT. Actually, I'm friends with his wife. And when I found out her husband was an EMT, I go, does he... We're at a party. We're at a work party. She's like, my husband's an EMT. I go, what? Does he see ghosts? Has he ever seen a ghost? Ghosts float around? She's like, what? I was like, you should ask him. You should ask him if he ever sees ghosts. And she's like, that's an interesting question. I've never asked him that. Well, then a couple months later, I go, hey, did you ever ask your husband if he ever saw ghosts? And she's like, oh, no. Totally forgot about is life after death a thing. Then a couple months after that, I go, hey, did you ever ask your husband about ghosts? And she's like, no, it's more important that, we have a kid, Jason. We gotta, deal with real family stuff. Maybe about a year and a half after I found out he was an EMT, I ran into him and her at another company party. And I go, hey, dude, I've been meaning to ask you this. I mean, come on, people are just trying to have a good time. This is what it's like knowing me in real life. It's not stable. It's not a normal thing. I see this guy, never met him before. I go, hey, man, your wife told me you're an EMT. And he goes, that's right. And I go, you ever see any ghosts? And he's like, no, I've never seen any ghosts. Never seen any ghosts. Now, what's funny is that the dynamic, the energy in that room at that moment, because it was a big party, but you know how everyone kind of splits off into their own little groups, having their own little conversation? He was talking to somebody else. I was getting ready to leave, and I just kind of interjected myself in. Imagine like in a high school movie about high school or whatever, where you have like the popular kids all talking, and then the weirdo nerd shows up and says, "Hey, Charles, are you coming to the D&D game this week?" Charles is like, "No, of course not. I never come to D&D games. Why would you ask?" Oh, okay. That was basically the energy. I was the nerdy guy. I don't regret asking it because I don't have any shame when it comes to stuff like that. But the rest of them, they're like, we're adults. We're all adults. And we're not talking about ghosts at a company party, which is, they're bad. Ghosts are probably the best thing to talk about. If the only thing you have in common with a bunch of people is you work in the same place, you should find some interesting stuff to talk about. But anyway, so, you know what? I'm going to actually save the other Paranormal Police story for the next episode, because we actually have a lot to cover with this next story. So, basically, you're like, oh, so it was about a guy, basically, you just told us a story about a guy who was really cold. Fantastic, Jason. Wow, amazing. Who knows? I think this guy probably was being affected by voodoo. I think he believed in it, so it was working on him. There is a mystical component to that. It's almost like a law of attraction. I think a lot of magic is built around the law of attraction, whether they want to admit it or not. And if you believe you're actually cursed, you will let that curse happen to you. And it's weird because, again, he's having physiological effects. It's not like he's just like, oh, I'm having the worst luck. My girl put a voodoo curse on me, and I got called up for jury duty. Oh, the perils of the paranormal. No, he was actually having a physiological response to all of it. Interesting story, though. We'll save the hot story for the next episode. It's just like that story, kind of. It's magic, but it's hot. It's very interesting. I don't want to downplay it, but we got to move on to this next one. Aiden, let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the world-famous Carpenter copter. We are leaving behind Boston. Why don't you fly us all the way out to Canada? So yesterday's episode, we did a story about a man in Canada who we will call Joey, in Toronto, Canada, who believes, he posted this back in April of 2024, so very recent story. He believes that vampires, which right now, let's just take a pause, right? Like, that's already awesome enough and bizarre enough, but he believes that vampires are working with the Canadian government. They're working with Justin Trudeau to eat the unvaccinated population of Canada. Justin Trudeau is giving out the addresses of everyone who didn't get the vaccine, and so vampires can go eat them. It's a fantastic story. I love that idea. It doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. We kind of broke it down. We're like, what? Why? What? I thought Justin Trudeau wanted people to get vaccinated, but if he's working for vampires, then what? Like, it doesn't make sense if you sit back and think about it. But this idea that a vampire can't drink COVID-vaccinated blood. I mean, just imagine you're in their position, right? You're like, oh, yummy, yummy, yummy. 7 billion people to feed on. And then all of a sudden, I don't know how many people got the vaccine. Let's say half. It might actually be smaller than that. But let's say 3 billion people got vaccinated. Imagine if your food source got cut in half. Like, you're like, oh, man, this totally sucks. Now I just can't jump out of a building and go, raw, I want to fuck your work. I want to suck your blood. He realized he mispronounced that a bit. I want to suck your blood. And then he's like, but first, he's all digging through your wallet trying to find your COVID vaccine card. No card? And he's drinking you and you're like, no, I left my card at home. It's 2024. Why do I need to show him my vaccine status? No! And the vampire dies of blood clots. That's what the idea was that people, I know I'm playing chicken with this podcast a lot, but the idea is it plays into that whole conspiracy theory that taking the vaccine causes massive blood clots and the vampire gets blood clots and all that stuff. So, fantastic. Fantastic 5-star conspiracy theory. Mwah! Chef's kiss as far as I'm concerned. I love it. But when I came across that, I thought, this dude has to be a troll. Like, this is too perfect. Nobody would believe this. This sounds like a great short story. So I was like, is this guy on the level? So I started looking through his posts. Started looking through his posting history. And he continued to post absolutely jaw-droppingly odd things. At one point, he asked, I don't even know what forum he asked this on. He asked it on Legal Advice. He asked it on the subreddit for Legal Advice Canada. He goes, my mother has passed away. My dad is still alive. Can I... Let me just be clear, I'm not saying this. Joey's saying this. Joey asks, is it possible my mother's passed away, which is always sad. My mother's passed away, my father's still alive. What I want to do is I want to make a deep fake sex video of my father and my mother. Do I have to get their permission? My mom's dead. So can I get permission from my dad since my mom's passed away? And people are like, wait, what? I don't know if legal advice is what's needed here. What in the world are you talking about? And he goes, well, I want to have a sex tape of my parents, but legally, if I get my father's written permission, is that enough? And kind of the general consensus was none of this is relevant in any sort of way. Why do you want a sex video of your parents? And Joey goes, it's because I want to celebrate me being conceived. I want to see this video. I don't know if he's going to add in like a little CGI him at the ending in the womb. Gives thumbs up to the camera. I don't know. I read that and I go, this has to be a troll. This has to be a troll. This has to be a troll, or it's this young man who's really, really going through some stuff. But I was like, I have to find out, is this guy a troll or not? And then I found his life story. He's posted all of this stuff willingly online. I've changed things. I changed his name. He said specifically the neighborhood he lived in. I took that out. He posts all this stuff online, and the reason why I want to share it with you is not to make fun of him. In fact, I think his story, in a way, I found parallels of myself. Not the parent stuff for sure, but let's take a look at this. This is a fascinating story. I don't think it's a troll at all. I think he actually believes all of these things, or believed at one time in these things. The vampire stuff's very current, but let's take a look at this. I find this uniquely fascinating. Because we see these comments, we see these posts. When we're in the conspiracy theory sphere, we see these posts pop up, and you think, who could write something like that? And very, very, very rarely do we actually get an inside look at who that person is, written in their own hand. Let's head back in time to when Joey was just a little boy growing up in Toronto, Canada. He goes, listen, man, my childhood wasn't great. It was actually pretty horrendous. My father was a raging alcoholic and he beat me a lot. And my mom didn't protect me. And that was just the way things were. That was his childhood. He said that his best friend was Jesus. Jesus was the only person he could talk to kind of deal with these scenarios that no kid, really no person should be put in. You know, physical violence at home. You never feel safe. He goes, I turned to Jesus, and Jesus was my rock. Jesus was helping me out. Now, because he was getting beat up as a kid, he would come to school all bruised up, and he had to lie. He had to cover for his father. And while he's lying to his peers and to his teachers and all that stuff, it actually builds up his ability to be an actor. Because he's acting all the time. all day long he's acting like everything is okay. Very soon he realizes, hey, I'm actually really good at acting. Maybe this can take me places. Maybe this is the skill I need to make my mark on the world. Now, I want to add in here, too. This is all his side of the story. There will be elements that come up that you may go, maybe he's exaggerating that, maybe this, maybe that. And that's fair. I'm not going to stop each time I think that stuff has kind of been exaggerated or not. But so this is his point of view. We're just getting his side of the story. He said at age 10, he was already such a fantastic actor that his mother said, Joey, you should be a professional actor. Everyone loves kid actors. There's always a need for more kid actors. So he starts getting work. He starts doing commercial work. He was in a couple movies, a couple television shows. But he goes, I was always just like an extra or a background character. I was never the star. I was never the star of the show. I was never the star of the movie. But Joey knew that was his destiny now. He knew that all of this, all of his suffering in childhood, created him to be one of the most successful actors in the world. He saw a future where he was going to be a multimillionaire, a face on the magazine covers, on the billboards, lining the streets of Los Angeles, walking to the stage of the Academy Awards to win that golden trophy. That's who Joey knew he was supposed to be. And that's who he was becoming. But he can't break through. He's just doing these small roles. Around this time, he's still very young, he's in middle school at this point, is when he drank his first beer. He stole a beer from the fridge and kicked it back and loved it. And soon began drinking even more. Middle school, high school, he's acting on the side. At school, he hangs out with the kids who smoke weed and drink, and that's what he does. He goes, I was drunk or high all the time unless I was at an audition. The rest of the time, I was just loused. But he's still just getting those bit parts. He goes to college for one reason. He goes to college because he wants to party like he saw in the movies. That's what he does. He goes to college and he just drinks and gets high all the time. He also, at this point, says in his college years, he slept with hundreds of women. So he's just blowing through chicks like it's nothing. But he's also running into a bit of an issue because he's blowing through his money. He goes, I'm in college, I'm in debt. Not just like college loan debt, but like date debt. Taking women out, buying liquor, buying weed, doing all this stuff. He goes, I just spending money like there was no tomorrow. Because he knew his tomorrow was Hollywood. When you're a multimillionaire, when you know that, when you know without a shadow of a doubt you are going to be a multimillionaire, who cares if you drop $500 on a weekend? He's living this life. He's going to be this big movie star. He has to live the movie star life. What happens is after college, it's time for him to get a job. And he just stumbles across this position where school is looking for a drama teacher. And on a whim, he applies, gets it. He gets the position. And he goes, this is insane. Like, I didn't even want this job. I didn't really know it existed. And I applied and I got it. He goes, all my other friends are looking for work and having to leave the area and stuff like that. He goes, my life is just so perfect. Now, that didn't stop the drinking and the smoking. He said I was drunk all the time at work, too. I don't think he worked at a college. I'm pretty sure he worked at a high school. He's not entirely specific on that either, but he goes, the first day of work, I was late. I didn't care. And when I showed up, I was drunk. But I was such a good actor, nobody could tell I was drunk. Nobody could tell I was stoned. So I'm working. And then when I'm not working, and I'm not doing auditions, I'm either picking up women or hanging out with my friends, and we're drinking and smoking. He said, my debt got bigger and bigger and bigger. But I just didn't care. Because I'm going to be a millionaire someday. 2021 rolls around. And things have gotten so bad that Joey has to declare bankruptcy. And what's interesting is, when he had to declare bankruptcy, Joey said, "This was the first time in my life where my bad decisions caught up to me." And he had to pay the consequence. So right now you're going, Jason, this is actually, outside of the whole incest video at the beginning, an interesting, intimate portrait of a man, a troubled young man, who had an unfortunate childhood, who came out of it, guns blazing, took the world by the horns, started acting, doing the parts, getting the jobs, doing what he could. Sure, he has big dreams, Jason, but don't we all? Yeah, it's very interesting how the beginning of his life is one of just this overcoming adversity. Some of the worst adversity, I would argue. I mean, being abused as a kid is awful when it's coming from your parents, your guardians, foster parents, people who are supposed to protect you. I mean, that's something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, ever. But this is where things shift. This is where things take such a turn for the bizarre that you have to wonder what truly is going on in this world. Because again, it's his point of view. He had to declare bankruptcy, and that hurt him in a lot of ways, not just financially, but it was the first time he faced the consequence for a bad decision. Around this time, one of his friends that he hangs out with, one of his drinking buddies, is like, "Guys, dude, you won't believe, there's this thing going on called the GameStop Stock squeeze," or whatever they called it. I don't remember exactly what they called it. We actually covered it back when it was happening, but the GameStop stock, in a nutshell, is basically people bet against GameStop. They said the company's going to lose a bunch of money, their stock's going to go down, and they do this all the time. There are companies that make their profits by betting against companies, and then basically ruining those companies. You had a bunch of other people, a bunch of smaller investors mobilize and say, "No, we think GameStop is going to succeed. We're going to bet for GameStop stock to go up." And it caused this thing called the squeeze. The idea was that the people who bet against it were either going to lose millions of dollars or billions of dollars. That there was no way out of this for the people who'd originally bet against GameStop. And I know I'm really kind of like dumbing it down and trying to make it simple, but in essence, that's what it was. Layman terms, that's what it was. It was fun to watch. It's still kind of going on. But at the time, it was this huge movement. We covered it on the show. Put that episode in the show notes. Now, his buddy is saying, "Dude, I just made a ton of money," because the stock did shoot up. It skyrocketed in value when this first started. And if you bought right before then and sold at just the right time, you would have made a ton of money. And you would have felt like you were doing something good because you were kind of sticking it to Wall Street. Joey's buddy's like, "Dude, I'm doing that whole GameStop thing. You guys got to get in on this, man. Like, it's just free money." And it's not just that. We're showing the fat cats on Wall Street in the business sector that they can't push us around anymore. We're making money and we're changing the world. Joey and his friends are sitting around there talking about this. They're getting super excited. Joey wrote, quote, "I had long suspected that the financial world was up to evil, and these guys online were saying that they were going to topple them and expose their evil by buying GameStop stock, which really spoke to me. I really wanted to be a hero and something great." He said all we would do, me and my friends, we would sit around, drink, get high, and talk about GameStop. We would talk about GameStop stock and how the evil forces of the world were going to be defeated by us. The idea of being a huge Hollywood star starts to fade from his mind. He has a new goal, a more noble goal. It's not about being famous for famous' sake. It's for being a warrior for good. For change. That was his destiny. He stopped going to auditions at this point in his life. He focused his time and energy on this GameStop stock. Him and his friends would sit around and they would talk about GameStop so much they began to make these connections between the prophecies of Nostradamus and the prophecies of the Mayans. Remember the whole December 21st, 2012? Into the world, the calendar? They begin to make these connections. Joey at this point posted online his prediction, because we're still in the year 2021, he posted his prediction that on December 21st, 2022, the Mayan calendar got it wrong, or we got it wrong when interpreting it, would probably be a better way to say it. The Mayans actually predicted that the end of the world was going to happen on December 21st, 2022, and it was related to the GameStop stock issue. The Mayans actually foresaw this squeeze that the little investor was putting on the evil fat cats. GME is the stock logo for GameStop. GME also means Great Mayan Empire. GME also means Guatemala, Mexico, and El Salvador, where the Mayan Empire ruled. No, I didn't fact check that. If that's wrong, that's not on me, okay? It's on Joey. I didn't fact check that, but he saw all of this. He begins to believe, and he posts this, that if you have just a single share of GameStop stock before December 22nd, 2021, before December 21st, 2022, you will be inducted into the army of Jesus Christ, who will come back on that date. If you have one stock of GameStop stock, you will now be a member of this holy order. Warriors, you'll be part of the army that will cleanse the planet in Jesus' name. He also predicted at this point GameStop stock would be worth, one stock would be worth billions of dollars. And he personally believed that he was going to be one of the top warriors in this hierarchy. Like, he was going to be a visionary leader of the new, pure world. His best friend, he was going to fight alongside Jesus against the evil of the planet. He posted this online. Someone screenshotted it, posted it on a subreddit where they were making fun of the GameStop people. Then they started trolling him. They started following him around. Well, this is what he's saying. This is what he's saying. But it's possible, right? People do this stuff online all the time, unfortunately. People start following him from subreddit to subreddit, making fun of him and bringing this up. And he is trying to... Okay, so this is interesting because we're going to get to something at the very end that does make you go, how much of this narrative, is this a reliable narrator or an unreliable narrator? So hold on, okay? I hope you guys find this. I find this absolutely fascinating. Again, I read posts like the GME stock. I actually found that original post he had made about the end of the world and GameStop stock. I had found that first before I found this. And I was like, this guy has to be a troll. I found the vampire thing, and then this, and then the incest video, and I go, this can't be real. He says they start following him around from sub to sub, and he's trying to, be like, no, guys, can't we all just get along? And then they find out about his bankruptcy, because he posts tons of stuff online. He's constantly posting. As I was researching the story, he was posting more stuff about other things. They bring up his bankruptcy, and that really angers him. Because remember, that was the first time he was held accountable for something that he did. And that really, really angered him. And he believes at this point he hated them so much. He hated the trolls so much. He wanted vengeance against them. That he opened himself up to demonic possession. Not like a full possession, but these dark spirits were inside of him now. He also says that the trolls were invoking spirits, were sending demons his way, and they were also entering him. So all of this hate caused him to become vulnerable to the evil he was trying to fight. He's still working at the school. He's still the teacher. He's still drinking and smoking all the time. He's given up his job of being a Hollywood actor because now he has a noble goal to be the right-hand man to Christ himself when he comes back to Earth. This is also when Joey begins to hear voices. He goes, at the time I thought the voices were from God. But when I look back at it now, I think they were actually the demons that had been sent from the Reddit trolls. We're getting close to the date. We're in the year 2022 now. December 21st, 2022 is coming up. And he's dealing with these trolls. And at this point, the GameStop thing was pretty much over with. Like, the stock is in a better position than it was a couple years ago. And I know, again, like in the past couple weeks, it's gotten big again. But for the most part, like, the hype died down. Or at least you didn't hear about it in most mainstream circles. But he's still on that path. This GameStop stock is going to make him... As he put it, he says, quote, as the date approached, I felt that Jesus was set to return and would make me a heavenly ruler on earth. So now it's not even about being a soldier to help cleanse the evil. He's actually going to, like, control some of it. Joey sees himself as being a heavenly ruler on earth. He then says, quote, as I became more and more hopeful of my right to rule, I became cockier. What happened is, at this point, I think it's like late November, early December 2022, we're right around there. Joey's talking to one of his students. In this conversation, Joey's talking to this kid, and he's like, hey, you know, things seem pretty crazy around here, don't it, kid? And the kid's like, yeah, things are getting kind of weird around here. And Joey's like, you want to know what's really weird? You know the Sikhs? You know who the Sikhs are? And the kid's like, yeah, I know who Sikhs are. Sikhs are actually a pretty sizable minority in Canada. He goes, yeah. Joey's like, yeah, the Sikhs. Did you know that Sikhs are actually demon worshippers? They worship the forces of darkness. And you'd be like, wait, what? You're sitting there with your teacher. Your teacher's supposed to be at least on the up and up. Not some crazy lunatic, but the kid's like, I don't know about that. Like, demon worshippers? Yeah, dude, they worship demons. The Sikhs worship demons. Did you know that? And the kid's like, no, I didn't know that. I didn't know that because I don't think it's true. And then Joey goes, dude, I'm going to let you in on a secret. Have you heard about GameStop Stock? And the kid's like, huh? What? Yeah, I guess. Joey begins to tell his student about his whole prophecy. He goes, yeah, if you have at least one share of GameStop stock, when Jesus comes down on that day, you're going to be a holy warrior. You have a bank account? Do you have a bank account? Are you old enough to have any money? Buy at least one stock, bro. Buy at least one stock and you'll be like this holy warrior. We'll help purge the planet. And I'm going to rule part of it. I don't know what part, but everyone will know who I am. They'll have to. I'm the leader. I mean, I'll lead as a justly godly ruler, of course. But they will know who I am. They'll know who I am. Well, the student goes to the principal and goes, listen, something's wrong with my teacher. And the principal apparently goes, yeah, I've kind of noticed it too. Principal goes to Joey's classroom and says, hey, buddy, one of your students just came and told me that you called Sikhs demon worshippers. I mean, that right there, that's enough for me to send you home. But then you're talking about all this, like, prophecy stuff. Jesus is coming back, soon. Like in 3 weeks and all this stuff about GameStop stock? What's going on? And the principal goes, Joe, you need to take the rest of the day off. Like, I don't know what's going on here, but you gotta leave. Joey goes home, and he's sitting at his house, and then there's a knock on his door. Joey opens the door, and it's the police. What Joey finds out is that his perfect acting skills had started to fall apart in the past couple weeks. He said, I was not aware of it, but the people closest to me started to realize I was acting incredibly erratically, talking about weird things, acting strangely. I was not aware I was doing those things, but the principal had noticed it, and when the principal came and talked to me and sent me home, he called up my mother to say, hey, is everything okay with Joey? He's been acting really weird lately. And at that point, Joey's mother said, yeah, he has been acting really weird. We've noticed it too. So the mother called in a welfare check on him. That's how, man, I know that his parents didn't seem to be class acts in the beginning for sure, you know, being beaten up as a kid and then the mom not doing anything. On the other hand, one of the worst things that a parent can do is make those calls on their kids. I've had to deal with that a lot in my extended family. Parents having to call in on their kids, turning them in, right? Turning them in to law enforcement. Because the alternative is, well, if I don't make the phone call, my son may die. Because the situation is that erratic. If I do make the phone call, my son's going to get arrested. I've had to be present in those moments more times than I would ever want to. And I never want to. So she makes that phone call. The police come and they take him to the hospital. And at that point, it's really interesting too, because remember, he's such a great actor that no one could actually see what was going on in his life. But in the end, it was the opposite. Everyone could see how chaotic things were but him. They take him to the hospital. They check him out, you know, see what his threat level is, all this stuff, figure out what's going on. He ended up being detained, like in a medical detention facility, mental health place, for 3 weeks. That's a long time. That's a long time for a mental health hold. That means that they really did see something there, whether it was a threat to himself or others or whatever. 3 weeks is quite a long time. And December 22nd comes and goes, as we all know. GameStop stock isn't worth billions. Jesus didn't come back, all of that stuff. It just came and went like every other day on the calendar. His family asks, hey, can he come back home for Christmas? And at this point, the doctors say, you know what, we'll consider that a test. We'll let him come back for Christmas, and as you guys keep an eye on him, make sure he's not having these weird thoughts, these beliefs, nothing like that. Let us know. So he does come back home. He spends Christmas with his parents, and then the doctors and the parents agree that he's fine. He'll be okay. This isn't some sort of long-lasting, dangerous delusion. At the end of all of this, Joey goes, you know, I look back on this and I think I was trying to fight evil, but instead I became the evil. I became the darkness. I became the scary things that I was so eager to destroy. He says he's been when he was writing this, he goes, I've been sober for a while, which is great. He said, I'm not going back to work. He goes, even if they ask me to come back to work, I don't think they will, but I'm not going back. He goes, I didn't even deserve the job in the first place. I just stumbled across it, and I wouldn't take it back if they offered it to me. And then he ends it with saying, quote, what I want to do now is create some sort of youth group that speaks with troubled, at-risk kids like I was and helps them find the strength to deal with their problems and stay in God's path. I've long felt like church has really failed to reach out to the kids, and that's why so many are turning away from it. I want to create a church that will help kids stay on this path and not live the way I did. He says he sold all of his GameStop stock. The end. Or is it? This is a fascinating story for me because I think in some ways I can see a reflection of myself. And that part is the dreamer. There's nothing wrong with wanting the big things in life. Talking about the Hollywood acting thing. The Heavenly Warrior thing is something separate. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be rich and famous. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful in your field. There is something interesting. There's an interesting through line where Joey does seem to feel like he needs to be exalted. And I think that's what was going on. The acting thing was something that he did because he thought it would make him rich and famous. And then eventually he goes, wait, no, I can not do auditions and not do any work whatsoever. I can just buy stock in GameStop and I'll be rich and famous. And people will look up to me as this holy warrior, this person who's going to help cleanse the planet. And I don't have to do any work whatsoever. I just need to buy stock. Now, he didn't really care about GameStop. He didn't care about the stock. It was about the promise of the future. And I think that's the same thing with the acting. So here's the reason why I'm bringing this up. I find it troubling that now he says, well, now I'm going to start a church with kids, with at-risk kids, because I don't think that the goal is to reach out to the kids. I think it's the promise of power that comes from that. Do you see what I mean? Because it's not, I want to work with kids. It's not, I want to go to a church and work at that church with kids. I want to start a church. I want to create a whole new program, and by create, he's the head. He's not just an employee. That's what I find troubling about this thing. Now, what's interesting, too, so remember, this is, in a way, a continuation from yesterday's episode, which this story ended in December 2022. Right. This is when he wrote this up at least a couple years ago. Now he's writing April 2024. He is working at a church. He's working at the food bank. He volunteers at the food bank. He says, I sold all the GameStop stock, and I understand that I had all this erratic thinking, but now he's running around thinking Justin Trudeau is sending vampires to his church to drink his members' blood, to feed off the congregation there. The delusional thoughts are still there. The delusional thoughts are still there. It's just changed. The origin story, the setup for it is different. So I'm afraid of the path this is going to go on. I ended yesterday's episode saying, Joey, I hope everything works out for you. Because I do. I hope nothing bad happens. But this thought pattern still seems to be going on. And what I find interesting, and I don't want to end on such a dour note, but I think that when I'll honestly be debating whether or not to edit this out the entire time, but I think it is part of the narrative. What I find really fascinating is he wrote out this long biography and he posted it on the Christianity subreddit. And then I don't know if one of the trolls found him, because the person who started this whole thing, like he posted this thing and then people are responding to it, those comments are deleted. The person who said something to Joey, their comments were deleted, but Joey's responses were not deleted. So you're basically seeing a one-sided conversation. Apparently, Joey has a kid. That whole narrative, his life story from beginning to end, in the middle, he mentions an ex-girlfriend. And, whatever. Everyone has an ex. Not a big deal. I actually left it out of the narrative because it wasn't important when I was first reading the story. She only showed up halfway through the middle. It's not a big deal. Then, apparently, this ex of his is saying that her child, who she's already given birth to, apparently this kid's a couple of years old, is Joey's. This is Joey's child. And from what I gather, someone asked him about that in the comments, and he responded in probably the most crass way you could talk about this topic. Listen, I know dudes who have paid a ton of child support and probably paid it unfairly. I know this type of stuff happens. But he wrote this. I'm going to read you this. Someone was talking to him about, don't you have a baby or whatever they said, something along those lines. And again, this, when he posts this narrative and you're like, oh, that's very interesting, right? That through line. Like, Jason, maybe you're misreading it. Maybe he does just want to work at a church. He's working at a church now. Maybe he's not always looking for power. Maybe that's not his end goal. You're right. I could totally be misreading it. But imagine reading someone's autobiography, specifically his self-written biography, and then you find something like this in the comments. Joey wrote, quote, "If I am the father, I would have requested she terminate the pregnancy because I was not ready for it. But like I said, I am sure I'm not because she got around. Actually, double teamed her twice with my boy. So I know for a fact that I'm not the only potential father and that she was with many other men at that time. I'm not sure the exact situation that led me to being pinned. I assume it's because I was acting then and I had a few roles and she saw dollar signs. I'm pretty sure she just told the doctors that I'm the father and that was that. But you are right. I have large memory gaps." So a lot of stuff getting thrown our way. He does post multiple times. He mentions it here. He had another post. He talks about double teaming women with his best friend. Again, like, that's the thing, the odd thing about this story. In the narrative, his self-written narrative, you never assumed that he was into threesomes with his best friend and a random girl. And then he tells this weird stories about, hey, if you guys ever accidentally ejaculated on a dude, I did once. I was double teaming this girl with my best bud and da-da-da. And I was like, what is going on? What could possibly be going on with this story? And while I was typing this out, he posted several times talking about GameStop stock. He's still talking about it, even though he was like, I had to sell that stock because it was ruining my life. Now, because it's popped up in the news recently. He's like, oh, I sold it. I sold it at 20. I should have kept it because it would have been at 37. And I'm like, dude, you need to chill out. I know that's not a medical term. And you'll see other people respond to him because he's posting all the time. People talk about this church he wants to build. They go, dude, you need to be sober for quite a few years before you even think about leading and counseling young people in the guise of your own church. If you want to work as a counselor with someone else, go nuts. Because there's someone you can turn to. But if you think you can start your own youth group and you've been sober for a couple months, like, work with another group. That's the thing. It seems like he always wants to be the exalted one, which is fine, right? There's nothing wrong with dreaming. But then he says stuff like this in regards to his kid. He goes, quote, I think when he is older, he's talking about, like, not paying child support. He doesn't believe it's his kid. He shouldn't pay child support. He shouldn't be dragged around by this mom. He goes, quote, I think when he is older, as in his son, I think when he is older, he will respect that I, as a man, stood up for my rights and denied to be conned into a relationship I never wanted to be in. I'll bet you 5 GameStop stocks that no kid would ever say, hey, Dad, I'm so glad you weren't around when I was a kid because you showed me what it meant to be a real man. A real man doesn't take care of his offspring. Now, here's the thing. He might not be the dad. Because I know that happens. But you also can't say I'm not his dad, and if I was his dad, he would agree with my decision not to be his dad. And he's been talking about this money that he's been spending on this kid. He also does say, I mean, again, you go, Jason, it could just be the woman's word against his. He has had sex with hundreds of women. He does say that. He goes, I've had sex with hundreds of women. None of them have ever wanted child support from me. None of them have said, it's my kid. His mother, before she passed away, was taking care of this child. So Joey's mother believed that this was Joey's son. And his mother was taking care of it. And the mother was taking care of the baby. So it doesn't sound like it's just her word against his. It does sound like there might be other factors, but I don't know. It was so fascinating to read the biography that we just talked about, and then I was like, oh, that's an amazing story about a guy who got sucked into a world of delusions, who now is out of them, but might be tempted to go back in. And then find this. I was done researching. I was done finding all of this stuff. It actually took me a long time to put all of this stuff together, right? When I was like, okay, all my notes are ready. It's ready to go. I looked down at the comments. I don't know why I didn't check them earlier. And then I find out he has a kid who he refuses to say is his kid. And even if it is his kid will admire him for not claiming it's his kid. Bizarre. Absolutely just bizarre thinking. Again, I'm going to repeat what I said yesterday. Joey, I hope that everything works out for you. I have no ill wishes against you. And I appreciate you posting this because it does give us a look behind the posts, right? We come across this stuff all the time and you have to wonder who's writing it. This is a view. He seems to be on, I mean, according to him at least, outside of a drug and alcohol addiction, which a lot of people deal with, he seems to be a pretty stand-up guy. Before you get to the comments, right? He just seemed like an ordinary guy, a dreamer who couldn't achieve his dreams. And then things got a little weird. He started to get delusional. There might have been a little bit of a mental health crisis, depression, could have been all sorts of things. I mean, he'd been drinking and smoking since he was in middle school. And then he got his life back together. What a story. But then you remember just a month ago, he was talking about vampires taking over Canada. Like legit taking over Canada. He said, I gotta leave the country because Trudeau's gonna turn the entire country into a prison camp. Possibly with vampires. So again, we're back in that delusional thinking. It's so fascinating. And listen, I do that too. Obviously, I was way more into conspiracy theories. I still love conspiracy theories. But I used to believe more conspiracy theories. I used to be the guy who'd be sitting there and online it'd be like some weird prophecy would come through and they'd add up all the dates and everything would match and I'd start to get nervous. I'm like, what if it's right this time? What if it's right this time? I did that for years. I bought into all these conspiracy theories, and at a certain point you go, well, none of them have ever come true. Right, world in 2012. All these presidents have left. All of them have walked away. So eventually you stop giving it so much credit. I walked the path that this guy walked. I can relate to it in a lot of different ways. I never saw myself as the holy warrior in any of these end of the world prophecies, but I believed in the prophecies. I believed in... By 2012, I was done. That was honestly, like, I was already out. I had a good chuckle the night the world didn't end. I started going to these conspiracy theory forums, and I was there to watch people backpedal. I kind of got out of it back in 2011. I started to have my eyes reopened. So, yeah, I there's some parallels there. And yeah, I dream big. I think everyone should dream big. I think everyone should shoot for the stars. So those things are very relatable to me. And it's funny because if you think about it, I'm really into conspiracy theory and the paranormal, and he is too. I wonder how many of you also have these same parallels. Like, is this just a personality trait and he just took it too far? But then at the ending, we get to all this sex video with the parents and not saying it's his kid. And even if it is his kid will admire him for not being a dad, and vampires taking over Canada. And it's like, this is just so bizarre, and it's ongoing. I hope it ends well. I really do. I really have my fingers crossed for this young man. Become a servant in the church. You don't need to be the leader. You don't need to be the minister. You don't need to be the counselor. Work with a counselor. Work with a minister. Do that. Because the thing is that he has a lot of learning that he needs to do himself before he can start teaching others. And I believe that someday he will be equipped to do that. But he needs to slow down, and he needs to not believe these things. Because I am afraid that eventually something is going to happen. He's going to overreact to a fairly innocuous situation. Because we do see that happen in the world of conspiracy theory as well. I didn't want to end it on such a downer note, but you know, I even tell my voice is getting dry. I've been talking so long. But I hope you guys found this fascinating. This is the type of stuff I live for, finding the almost behind the scenes of these stories. I love. I hate that there's so much tragedy built into it, but it really does give us a look into the mind of a conspiracy theorist. And what happens is you look at it and then you realize, oh, that's me. Like, I recognize so much of this dude in me. So much of that story I could relate to. So much of that story is me. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal conspiracy and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but